was no easy path for Johnny Depp as a plaintiff to a finding of liability. In fact, the statements in the Washington Post never even mentioned Johnny Depp by name. So the jury had to draw several inferences. Number one, that Amber Heard was calling herself a victim of abuse, and that Johnny Depp specifically was the one who supposedly abused her. And that means that the jury completely rejected Amber Heard's testimony about that abuse. Keep in mind that under the law, as her attorney pointed out, if the jury believed that there was even one instance of abuse, physical or otherwise, then they had to enter a defense verdict for Amber Heard. So that means the jury found zero instances of abuse in that jury room in order to find for Johnny Depp across the board on all three of the statements that he sued upon.
It's a total rejection of Amber Heard's story and her complaint. We want to turn to Kristen Gibbons-Fedden, a former federal prosecutor who was in the Bill Cosby trial, prosecuted Bill Cosby. You know, I look at the verdict form for Amber Heard's lawsuit against Johnny Depp. As I mentioned, there were three potential statements that were allegedly defamatory. In one of them, the jury finds for Amber Heard, which is an interesting mixed verdict because in some ways, Kristen, it seems like you find for one, you can't find for the other. What do you make of that?
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting. What I would make of it is that the jury found that there was no abuse or that the attorneys didn't meet their burden of proving that there was abuse. But also that Amber Heard did not set Johnny Depp up on that one night in question when she called the police. So if you kind of look at the verdict form and how they found no defamation for the two statements made by Mr. Waldman or Johnny Depp's attorney at the time, who was making those allegations, saying that Amber Heard's allegations were a hoax, those were the two statements that the jury said, it's not defamatory. We don't find them false, so there's no liability there. The one that they did find to be defamatory was the one where it says, you know, they set Mr. Depp up by calling the cops, but the first attempt didn't do the trick. That's the statement that they said was defamatory. There's no abuse in that statement. So in fact, they can find that there was no abuse, but that Mr. Waldman perhaps went a little too far in describing the tumultuous relationship.
Yeah, there is actually an internal consistency with the jury's verdict, and the bottom line is that they don't believe Amber Heard's claims of abuse at the hands of Johnny Depp, but for this defamatory statement that was actually made by Adam Waldman, the attorney for Johnny Depp, they found it defamatory, but as you point out, Kristen, that had to do with whether or not she set him up to make him look like he was doing domestic violence. They obviously said that went a bridge too far. Let me go to Mitra Ohorian, an entertainment attorney. So this is interesting. Now we know the verdict. We also see the damages here. $10 million awarded to Johnny Depp in terms of compensatory damages. That's things like lost wages, lost opportunities. $5 million in punitive damages. Punitive damages are designed to send a message.
Absolutely. You know, the 10 million almost seems arbitrary because, you know, is the value of the opportunities that Johnny Depp lost throughout his career, you know, going forward, valued at $10 million? Probably not. We know that for Pirates alone, he was making roughly 22 million. So that number, I'm almost curious to know how they came up with the 10 million. The 5 million is very telling, the fact that there is an award of punitive damages, because not only are they saying that you caused harm, but you should also be punished because you caused harm in a way that that was, you know, malicious, which was what the finding was.
Let's take a step back here. I want to turn back to Danny Savalos because you mentioned it, but I think it bears repeating. It is very hard to sue a public figure like Johnny Depp for defamation. The law is essentially stacked in favor of the defendant so that we can protect the First Amendment and have free speech. There are high hurdles that Johnny Depp had to overcome in order to receive this verdict. And it's quite astonishing that he was able to do so given these facts, which again underscores what the jury has decided here, that they did not buy one single bit of Amber Heard's story.
The Supreme Court long ago created a different rule for defamation when public figures are suing, understanding that for whatever reason, we let people have a little more liberty when it comes to criticizing. First, it was public officials, and then that was expanded to public figures. But that actual malice standard, it doesn't have anything to do with hatred. It's more about either knowing your statement is false or recklessly disregarding the falsity of the statement. And what's really interesting is that this is such a complete rejection of Amber Heard's testimony. Yes, the finding on the second count, I think when you look at that count, that was a very specific allegation. And when you have very specific allegations, there are more opportunities for those facts to be false. So I think the jury seized upon those. But on the whole, it's not inconsistent logically. I mean, this is basically the jury saying that they believed very little, if anything, of what Amber Heard said and produced in evidence, and they tended to find Johnny Depp credible. And Johnny Depp's path to a finding of liability was not a slam dunk at any stage. He had quite a bit to prove, even with the lesser civil burden of proof of preponderance of the evidence and clear and convincing evidence. But still, he had the burden to prove each and every element nonetheless.
Let's turn to NBC's Miguel Almaguer, who's been covering the court. He's outside the Fairfax County Courthouse. I saw some crowds out there earlier. And Miguel, I understand you have a statement from Amber Heard's lawyer.
Yeah, I want to read that to you, Savannah. They write, the disappointment I feel, of course, this is coming from Amber Heard. The disappointment I feel today is beyond words. I'm heartbroken that the mountain of evidence still was not enough to stand up to the disproportionate power, influence, and sway of my ex-husband. Heard goes on to write, I'm even more disappointed with what this verdict means for other women. It's a setback. It sets back the clock to a time when a woman who spoke up and spoke out could be publicly shamed and humiliated. It sets back the idea that violence against women is to be taken seriously. She goes on to say, finally, I'm sad I lost this case, but I'm even sadder still that I seem to have lost a right I thought I had as an American to speak freely and openly. Now, this statement came to us just minutes after the verdict came out, so it seemed to be a prepared statement that Amber Heard sent out to the press. And as the verdict was being read, Savannah, we should also mention that a crowd did gather outside the court steps. And for each count that was being rattled off, we could hear cheers of support when they were in favor of Johnny Depp. Certainly a pro-Depp crowd has been out here for the last several weeks. They continue to be out here today. We are several hundred feet away from the front steps of the courthouse, and we could hear those cheers very clearly over and over again as this verdict went mostly in the direction for Johnny Depp, Savannah.
All right, and I want to turn to Danny Savalas for a final thought. There is the right of appeal in Virginia in a civil case, so Amber Heard will have that decision before her whether to file an appeal in the next 30 days.
And so, too, does Johnny Depp have the right to file an appeal within 30 days in the state courts of Virginia, usually to the Circuit Court of Appeals. So they will weigh that. But of course, that will be another costly battle because, after all, the appellate court does not find the facts anew. They consider only whether the jury made some serious errors of law or there was some abuse of discretion. So appealing is not a redo of the facts. It's anything but. It's always a long shot whenever you file that notice of appeal in civil or criminal court.
So for the moment, this celebrity trial wraps up with a stunning jury verdict almost entirely for Johnny Depp on the issue of whether or not he abused his former wife, Amber Heard, and a finding of defamation for Amber Heard on one of the statements made by Johnny Depp's lawyer. So a mixed verdict, but a rejection and repudiation of the story Amber Heard has been telling in court for the last few weeks. We're going to have a lot more this evening on NBC Nightly News, also tomorrow morning on Today. I'm Savannah Guthrie. Thank you for watching.
Hey, everybody, you've been watching breaking news coverage on NBC News. You're joining NBC News now. And I just want to kind of recount for you guys that we are watching this breaking news coming out of the Amber Heard, Johnny Depp trial in which they countersued both one another. The jury siding with Johnny Depp on all defamation accounts, awarding $15 million in damages, compensatory damage of $10 million, and punitive damages of $5 million as well. They also sided with Amber Heard on just count 2, awarding $2 million compensatory damages and no punitive damages there. I want to bring back in Barbara McQuaid, who's been standing by for us, a former U.S. attorney and law professor at the University of Michigan Law School. I'm inciting totally in favor, Barbara, of Johnny Depp here. Give me your reaction first when you heard that.
Yeah, well, you heard that element by element breakdown of the claims, and the jury found that he proved the case. I think a lot of this comes down to things that they watch in the courtroom. I think sometimes we who watch more casually in the media, we read the reports at the end of the day, we watch some of it. We're not seeing every detail that the jury sees, and I have great respect for jury verdicts because they are watching not just what was said, but they're watching the body language. They see things that you can't see outside of the courtroom that are inside of the courtroom. It's sort of like watching a sporting event. Being at a football game, you can see the band, you can see the crowd, you can feel the atmosphere. I think in the same way, being in the courtroom to watch a trial has a very different feel from watching on television. You can see that body language, you can see the eye contact between the parties, and I think some of those things are what ultimately tipped for the jury this verdict, which is, by and large, a victory for Johnny Depp. I read the score: Johnny Depp 15, Amber Heard 2.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the 3 counts that Amber Heard filed against Johnny Depp, and it was the second count in which she was awarded $2 million in damages. And it was from a statement appearing in April 27, 2020 on the online edition of the Daily Mail. And these were statements made by Depp's attorney at the time. And I just want to read the statement so folks really kind of understand the counts and the way in which they were framed. And this statement saying, quite simply, this was an ambush, a hoax. They set Mr. Depp up by calling the cops, but the first attempt did not do the trick. The officers came to the penthouses, thoroughly searched and interviewed, and left after seeing no damage to face or property. So Amber and her friends spilled a little wine and roughed the place up, got their story straight under the direction of a lawyer and publicist, and then placed a second call to 911. So it is that count in which Amber Heard was actually awarded $2 million. I'm wondering, in cases like this, Barbara, if you could take us inside the jury room, especially after they kind of convened and then they had to go back to jury deliberations and then back again when it comes to filling in that line. And we don't necessarily know what that blank line was or what they were referring to, how it is they come up with these numbers in the first place: 2 million, 5 million, 10 million.
Yeah, well, there was testimony on the loss, and so they are able to hear things like the financial consequences to Johnny Depp of losing some of these opportunities in movie parts like Pirates of the Caribbean or Fantastic Beasts, and so they are able to assess those things. Some of it's a little bit of guesswork. I mean, it's why they end up with round numbers like 10 million and 5 million. It isn't, 9.87 million. So there is a little guesswork. I also think it's got to be difficult for people who are not in Hollywood, sort of ordinary people, to make decisions in these astronomical numbers of millions of dollars. And so, this is their best guess as to the value of the harm that was suffered by his reputation.
What precedent does it set? I mean, we have seen a lot of defamatory cases, especially when it comes to Hollywood versus the media. Seeing defamatory when it comes to a husband versus an ex-wife is certainly quite different. And then you add on to that Hollywood, you add on to the spotlight, you add a world famous superstar actor and actress. Talk about the pressures on a case like this and what this means for cases like it going forward, the precedent it sets.
Well, I was actually surprised to see Johnny Depp prevail here, only because I think the standard is so high, as you mentioned, clear and convincing evidence. And it's designed in such a way to protect First Amendment rights so that people can say things about public figures that may not be 100% technically true, but as long as they don't do it with actual malice, that is, knowing that what they're saying is wrong, then that's typically permissible. And so he prevails here. And so I think that could cause, perhaps embolden other people to say, maybe I ought to give it a try as well. Sometimes I think if you are that public figure, you think there's no way I can win a case like this. I'm going to get run through the ringer, as Johnny Depp was. Every aspect of my personal life is going to be on display for others. No thanks. I don't want to go down that road in light of the unlikelihood that I'll actually prevail. Now that Johnny Depp has prevailed, I can imagine that other people might find themselves emboldened to do so. I also am concerned, on the other hand, that it does suggest that people who are wealthy and famous and male are protected by our institutions.
Right.
Every case is decided on its facts, but to the extent you're looking for broader themes, for women who feel that they have been abused by powerful men, I wonder if this doesn't set back that cause a bit.
Yeah, that's a really good point. One that I would expect someone like you to make, considering the aspects of the situation, the details of the situation, and the power behind it, and the power, you're right, and the wealth that Johnny Depp has behind him, and the type of lawyers he can get to argue on his behalf. Barbara, if you'd stand by for me, I'd appreciate it. I want to bring in Ron Allen, who's outside the courthouse for us and has been covering this thing. for the last couple of days or so. Ron, good to talk to you. Just take us there for a moment. Give us the reactions you've been hearing on the ground there as we heard this verdict.
Cheering, yelling, and screaming support for Johnny Depp, as has been the case for the last number of weeks. He had been winning this in the court of public opinion, it seemed obvious, online, social media, and as the verdicts were read, cheering outside the court of people here today. We don't have the huge crowd that we've had for the past number of weeks because Depp is not here. He is in England. He's playing a number of concerts, and he has just released a statement, which I can read to you in part. It says, 6 years ago, my life, the life of my children, the lives of those closest to me, and also the lives of the people who for many, many years have supported and believed in me were forever changed, all in the blink of an eye. Then he goes on to say, and 6 years later, the jury gave me my life back. I am truly humbled. That is what Depp has always said this is about. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about trying to get his good name and reputation back because he vehemently denied the allegations that he was an abuser, that he had committed violent acts against Amber Heard. He admitted that he had problems with substances and abuse issues, but he wanted to make sure that it was clear that he did not do the things that Amber Heard alleged that he did. And he's been vindicated, I guess you could say, here today. So that from Depp, we heard a statement from Heard released as well. I don't have. He's obviously disappointed by this and points out to the larger concern about what chilling effect this might have on other victims of domestic violence. The problem is that she has very little credibility and has had very little credibility throughout this whole process. Depp's case basically was, and they summed it up in one of their closing arguments, they said that she put on the performance of a lifetime on the stand, talking about all the harm that had come to her. And the jury apparently believed that, except in this one incident where they were talking about this incident at the penthouse where she called 911, and this was the comment made by Depp's lawyer about her, where the jury did find that Depp's lawyer had defamed her, and there was some money, some millions of compensation. But the bottom line, this is a huge victory for Johnny Depp. And people out here outside the courthouse are celebrating it. Again, we don't have the huge crowd that we have had. I'm sure at this point, social media is exploding. I haven't had a chance to dive in there yet. But this is what people wanted based on what we were seeing online. And again, there's a lot out there. I hear a lot of advocates for victims of violence who are really concerned about what this could mean and how this could have a chilling effect going forward. But here now, Depp's folks are very happy. Jasmine?
Yeah, Ron Allen, thank you. Stand by for me, would you? Because I do want to go back to Barbara McQuaid on that. And that kind of picks up, Barbara, on the point that you were making before we even went to Ron, and that is the effects that this could have on future victims of domestic violence, right? Women that decide to come forward with the courage that they have to come forward, and then to see someone in a powerful position like Johnny Depp, in fact, to be kind of the victor in this situation. So there is that element to it all. And then, of course, just the element that Ron Allen painted for us, which is folks outside the courtroom cheering as these verdicts were read.
Yeah, it does show to the star power of Hollywood. You know, Johnny Depp, he's a major movie star, and there are people who will overlook any misdeed because they love his on-screen persona, you know, Captain Jack Sparrow. I think if I were advising a woman who were thinking about filing a complaint against a powerful man who has abused her, I would not let this case stand in the way of doing that. What I would say to that person is that every case is decided on its own facts. And the facts here favor Johnny Depp. Now, certainly there is that aura, and you know, one hopes that the jurors were able to separate that aura from the facts they heard in court. But the facts here did tend to demonstrate that Amber Heard had a lot of credibility issues. She had substance abuse issues, as did Johnny Depp. And so the facts do matter in these cases.
Let me read for you a tweet from Liz Sikuro. She is a champion of victims of rape and a champion of victims of sexual assault, specifically women. And she tweeted this online. And I think this kind of speaks specifically, Barbara, to what you were just saying, and kind of can expand on that conversation, which is this. I don't believe in the assertion that Amber Heard made that this will have a chilling effect for others coming forward. This was very much about these two individuals with the normal amount of uphill battle for the woman and a looser civil standard for Johnny Depp. What do you make of that statement?
Yeah, again, I think she's sharing this viewpoint that these cases are very fact specific. She's also pointing out that this is a civil case. So this is not a criminal case where you have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. In a civil case, the standard is preponderance of the evidence. In this one, because of the special protection under the First Amendment that defamation gets, it was a little bit higher standard of clear and convincing evidence, but it's a little different. What I think she's saying is these are apples and oranges. And so although in this case, we did see the powerful male movie star prevail, we shouldn't say that no woman can ever defeat or hold accountable a powerful man, because facts matter.
Right. This could kind of be a case in and of itself, considering the two individuals that are involved in this case specifically. Barbara, continue to stand by for me. I want to bring in Danny Cevallos if I could. Danny, thanks for jumping on for us. I know that you're on specials, so I appreciate you kind of swinging over to us as well. And kind of give me the nuts and bolts, kind of your reaction to hearing the verdict that we did.
Candidly, I'm surprised. Johnny Depp did not have an easy walk through to a verdict here. I mean, he had to prove many elements. He had the burden to prove each and every element of defamation, not beyond a reasonable doubt, but at least to a preponderance, and in some cases clear and convincing evidence. But he had to prove that the statements that Amber Heard made were about him, and that essentially they painted him as an abuser. And keep in mind that as long as the jury found any one instance of abuse, physical or otherwise, then in theory they should have entered a verdict for the defendant, Amber Heard, and against Johnny Depp. That means that they didn't believe a single incident of abuse, because if they had, then it was almost required to enter a defense verdict for Amber Heard. Now, as to Amber Heard's counterclaims, they were always rather complicated. They are basically the double layer of liardom of defamation cases that I think are very complicated. Basically, she said that someone else lied when that person called me a liar. But it does mean that the jury, at least as to one of those claims, found that Johnny Depp's lawyer was acting as Depp's agent. And no surprise, I wasn't surprised they didn't award punitive damages because maybe they concluded, well, his lawyer made it. That doesn't really mean that Johnny Depp was reckless in the making of that statement. So I'm not too surprised there, but I am astonished that the jury was not able to find that any one instance of abuse occurred. And I think Amber Heard's lawyers had kind of a point when they say, how much more evidence is a victim of abuse required to have? You know, that they were saying that Amber Heard was a victim of abuse and she had video and all this other kinds of evidence in addition to her testimony. So what that means is the jury discounted that video evidence, photographic evidence, and Amber Heard's own testimony, believing that she was arguably never a victim of abuse at Johnny Depp's hands. Really a very surprising verdict.
I went to the Barbara McQuaid School of Law about 10 minutes ago, and I'd like to attend now the Danny Cevallos School of Law. And if you could, Danny.
It's a much easier school to get into, the Danny Cevallos School of Law. It's almost open admissions.
I'm going to need a cheat sheet real quick. If you could, give us the ABCs of punitive versus compensatory. And do you believe the 10, the 5, and the 2, the numbers 10-5 to Johnny Depp, 2 to Amber Heard, are based off of, and I pose this question to Barbara as well, but want to get your take on it, are based off of lost wages, for instance?
Yeah, this is a really hard case to talk about traditional compensatory damages.
Right.
If we were talking about a car accident case, which occupies a lot of cases in court, there are what are called boardable damages. There are rules about what you put up. Okay, here's an emergency room record. That's an out-of-pocket expense. And then here's kind of what we generally value I don't know, a sprain and strain type injury, 6 months of physical therapy, this and that. There's sort of a traditional path. That kind of compensatory damages was not part of the calculus in this case. In essence, the compensatories here were almost the same as the punitives. The jury went in the back room and they thought, what should we award for compensatory and punitives? That is not the way it normally works. Normally, they've got a mountain of evidence, medical records, medical testimony that says, okay, this person had a fractured femur. What is the value in our minds of a fractured femur and somebody who can't work for the next 10 years? There's a little more math involved. Here, both the punitives and the compensatory were just sort of plucked out of the air, it seems. Punitives, that does happen. In fact, punitives can often be runaway punitive damages because the jury really doesn't get any guidance as to what should be meant to punish someone. And that's the difference. Compensatory compensates someone for their loss. Punitive damages are strictly meant to punish this defendant. And in this case, under Virginia law, they had to find, in order to award punitive damages against Heard, that she was at least reckless with disregard, or recklessly disregarded the truth when she made those supposedly false statements. So,
can she appeal?
She can. She has 30 days in which to appeal in Virginia under state law. And the question is, will she appeal, and what issues will she appeal? Will she appeal, issues with the jury instructions, issues with the jury's finding, or rulings that the judge made at trial? There are a lot of different options for appeal, but each one of them costs money in the form of lawyers' fees and additional fees. And the reality is, when you go to appellate court, whether you're in criminal or civil, the reality is it's not a fresh bite at the apple. The standards for an appellate court's review are usually things like abuse of discretion. In other words, that no other jury or judge could have made this finding, that it's just a huge mistake.
Danny, Johnny Depp's attorneys are speaking now at the podium. Let's take a listen.
Yep.
By any evidence. We are grateful, so grateful to the jury for their careful deliberation, to the judge and the court staff who have devoted an enormous amount of time and resources towards this case.
Our judicial system is predicated on each person's right to have his or her case heard, and we were honored, truly honored, to assist Mr. Depp in ensuring that his case was fairly considered throughout the trial. We are also most pleased that the trial has resonated for so many people in the public who value truth and justice. Now that the jury has reached its conclusive verdict, it's time to turn the page and look to the future. Thank you all so much. Thanks to the jury.
Thank you so much.
Have you spoken to Johnny? How is he feeling? How's Johnny feeling? Will Johnny and Amber ever speak to each other again?
We are hearing from the attorneys, Johnny Depp, essentially thanking the jury and saying they were grateful for the decision that was made in favor of their client, Johnny Depp, who's not here. It seems as if he's overseas in the UK preparing for some concert, so he wasn't able to appear at the proceedings today in the reading of the verdict, but nonetheless not surprised to hear from the attorneys in that way. Want to go to Steve Pedersen. I believe we still have Steve Pedersen on for us if we could. Steve, come into the conversation with me if you could, and provide for us what you're seeing online, of course, the reaction. We heard from Ron Allen, the reaction outside the courthouse, which was cheers, hearing that they were deciding in favor of Johnny Depp being awarded $15 million total, both in punitive and compensatory damages, and $2 million to Amber Heard. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I mean, the court of public opinion now unleashed, as they really have been since the beginning of the trial, but really now speaking out. A lot of, obviously, memes where this has been playing out to, in effect, malign Amber Heard and celebrate Johnny Depp. That continues online as well. But there have been a few more measured takes. One from Sophie. He says he won in the court of public opinion. He won in the court of law. Justice has been served, and now he can finally have his name and reputation back. That is along the lines of what we're hearing in, of course, the more measured takes. On the other side, a lot of heartbreak, especially from women who feel like Amber Heard had the evidence, Amber Heard had the case, Amber Heard was making her points, and now they see this as another form of silencing women. One from Ivana, she says Amber Heard had the photos, the video, the text messages, audio recordings, eyewitnesses, medical notes, therapist notes, and she was still not believed. This is a massive setback for women. Of course, I think there's going to be so much discussion about the chilling effect that this has for abuse survivors who want to speak out moving forward. Yasmin.
All right, Steve Patterson, thank you. Barbara McQuaid, Denny Savalos, Ron Allen, thank you guys all as well. Just to recap here, everybody, we have now gotten a verdict between Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, both suing one another. The jury siding in favor of Johnny Depp, awarding him a total of $15 million in damages, and on one count in favor of Amber Heard, awarding her $2 million in damages. We're going to continue to be following this story as we go. And if we get any updates or statements in from either one of them officially, we'll bring them to you as well. We'll be back with much more.
Choosing T-Mobile is like paying for this, but getting that. And so much more. More 5G bars in more places. More savings so your family saves 20% versus the other guys. And now, for a limited time, there are even more ways to save at T-Mobile. Get up to $1,000 when you switch your whole family on our Magenta Max plan.
I want to welcome you to the first presidential debate. In fact, we've been told we can't go any farther. Here are some resilient folks. Let me get in.
Top Story with Tom Llamas is your news playlist on NBC News Now. And now you can listen to it as a podcast, available anytime and anywhere.
Hey, everybody, I'm Yasmin Vasugian. You're watching NBC News Now. Here's what's happening. Blockbuster verdict. The jury awarding Johnny Depp $15 million in his defamation case against ex-wife Amber Heard. Details on the dramatic final act in court, plus the shifting Latino vote, I should say. What's driving the Hispanic community towards the GOP in Florida? And is it based on facts? And reality checkup, the surprising amount of men who are skipping annual visits to the doctor and why it could be a huge mistake. Hey, everybody, we're going to begin with that stunning verdict in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard defamation trial. Johnny Depp winning his case against his ex-wife, the jury awarding Depp $15 million in damages. The jury also awarded Amber Heard $2 million. Want to go to NBC News correspondent Ron Allen, who's outside the courthouse for us in Fairfax, Virginia. I guess let's first get kind of walk us through how both sides are reacting here, Ron.
Depp's side is joyous and relieved and celebrating. There were cheers outside the courthouse when the verdicts were read. There were a small group of supporters here for Depp. Not many people showed up, as has been the case, because he is not here. We have since heard from him. He's over in the UK doing concerts, music concerts, saying essentially that this was always about the truth, that this was always about getting his life back and his reputation back. And he thanked the jury and said he was humbled because the jury gave him his life back, essentially. Amber Heard left. She was here to hear the jury's decisions. She and her entourage left quickly out the back door. She released a statement saying how disappointed she was and how she worries that this is going to be a setback for other victims of domestic violence. The bottom line, though, is that the jury didn't believe much of what she had to say. The jury believed Johnny Depp. The jury believed Depp's lawyers, apparently, when they said that Heard was putting on the performance of her lifetime during this trial, essentially lying about what allegedly happened to her and not telling the truth. So just a real stark contrast. Heard did win on one count, essentially, but I think this is going to be seen as an overwhelming victory for Depp's side. And the people outside the courthouse certainly seem to feel that way. He had been winning in the court of public opinion throughout this entire process. He has now won in the court of law, and his followers, his fans, are going to be quite relieved and quite happy about what's happened here in this court today.
Expand on that a little bit for us, Ron, if you could, of course, the reaction not only that we're seeing online, but outside the courthouse, as in fact they were reading that verdict just a couple of minutes ago.
People were ecstatic. As each verdict was read, there were cheers going up from the crowd. People here never saw this as a two-sided thing. It's amazing how over the course of the last number of weeks, Johnny Depp has won over the crowds. He has been the one who has been mobbed as he's been leaving the courthouse every day. He is the one who people have been coming here to support. There have been a few Heard supporters around, but they have clearly been the minority. And there are people who are saying incredibly negative things about her online, here outside the courthouse because they just didn't see her as having any credibility. They said that she was twisting facts, that she was, her facial expressions became a thing online about how she seemed to be dismissive of what was going on and so forth. And now here today, again, in a court of law, one after another, there were 3 decisions in favor of Depp and only 1 in favor of Heard. And they'll take it, and that's where they are. And they are taking some satisfaction in the fact that the jury just didn't seem to believe enough of Heard. They certainly believed what Johnny Depp was saying because they essentially saw him as the victim of defamation, that Heard had essentially made up these allegations, lied about them, and that she'd done it knowingly with malicious intent to destroy Johnny Depp. That's what Depp wanted the public, the jury to believe, and that's what they believed. And as I said, he's released a statement saying that he's very grateful because he now feels that he has his life and reputation back.
Ron Allen,
Jasmine,
thank you so much. Want to bring in now NBC News legal analyst Denny Savalas. Denny, what stood out to you the most about this verdict?
I was surprised that Johnny Depp prevailed. I mean, I don't normally make predictions, but silently and off the record, I was expecting that the jury would find in favor of nobody. I thought it would be 0-0 defense verdicts in this case, and they found for Johnny Depp. Now, that means that they believed that each of those statements Amber Heard made were about Johnny Depp in that Washington Post article when they didn't mention him. And in addition, that it identified him as an abuser. And more than that, that allegation was false. And that means that the jury didn't find a single instance of abuse by Johnny Depp, physical or otherwise, because if they had, then they should have entered a defense verdict for Amber Heard. For that reason, for me, it is very surprising, not even going to credibility, but just because Johnny Depp's path to victory was difficult. He had the burden. The burden always rested with him. Yes, it was preponderance of the evidence or clear and convincing evidence, but he still had the burden of proof. And there were several different elements of defamation that he had to prove. I'm not as surprised that Amber Heard's counterclaims failed. I thought they were complex. They were essentially alleging that someone else lied when they called her a liar. So you have 2 layers of alleged lying. Might have been very confusing for the jury to follow, but the second statement I always thought had the most possibility, the one that the jury did find in favor of Amber Heard, only because it was so specific. If you look at that statement against all the other statements alleged in this case, that statement by Waldman that Amber Heard sued upon in her counterclaim, the second one that they found liability, was very specific, very factually specific. And when that happens, there is a lot more opportunity for something to be false. So in a sense, very surprising today. But once I knew from the very first, when they found the headline of the WAPO article, Amber Heard liable on that, I knew they were going to find her liable on everything, because last thought, something that journalists know that maybe regular folks out there don't know, is that I write columns fairly often. When you do, you don't write the headline. The editors write the headline. So to every journalist watching, they must have thought, she can't be liable for the headline. She didn't write it. But the jury didn't buy that. That especially, I was nonplussed. I was very surprised as to that finding.
Well, let me ask you this, Danny, because in every conversation that we've been having, especially from our correspondents on the ground, they talk a lot about the credibility issue that Amber Heard has, right? How do you even find an impartial jury when you have 2 celebrities up on the stand, essentially, suing one another? Both of which likely have reputations in the minds of these jurors for quite some time. I mean, people feel as if they know celebrities, right? Johnny Depp especially. I mean, we have all known him for a very long time publicly, and the likelihood that you have not formed an opinion of him going into this thing is very low.
Right. The standard in these high-profile cases is not that a juror must be ignorant of the people or the facts or what has happened. It's just that given what they know, can they set aside whatever they know about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard and render a fair and impartial verdict? That's a difficult standard, but not impossible, because we have to have these trials. We have to be able to impanel a jury. And you're right, Johnny Depp has been really famous since I was a kid, since Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, listen, he wasn't the marquee player in Nightmare on Elm Street, but just to give you an idea, he's been famous and super famous for decades. So it's impossible to think that you could seat a jury that would just have no idea who Johnny Depp was. Maybe more likely that they might not know Amber Heard. But the bottom line is that the jury was, they went through the jury and seated a jury that even if they knew Johnny Depp, they could set that aside and evaluate credibility. But what I think we saw here is that je ne sais quoi, that it factor. When you think about it, Johnny Depp is paid millions by studios for that it factor. And whatever it is, it was on display because he must have charmed this jury. At least as somebody who watches a lot of trials, the first 5 minutes of Johnny Depp's testimony, I thought, who's going to believe that this is ridiculous? What is that? What accent is that? Where is he from? And yet the jury was willing to listen. And I have to admit, after day 2 or 3, I was drawn in and I thought, wow, he speaks delightfully. I mean, it's ridiculous. I didn't really think that, but I mean, Johnny Depp really did, bottom line, as an actor, a very successful actor, charmed this jury.
One last thing, and Barbara McQuaid and I were talking about this, but what this means for women coming forward when it comes to any kind of abuse allegations. And a point was made online that I read by this woman named Liz Sikuro. She is someone that champions women when it comes to assault cases, sexual assault cases, harassment cases, that kind of thing. And she talked about the fact that this is not necessarily setting a precedent for other women coming forward and or other situations like this, because this case is incredibly unique to these two individuals. All eyes were on these two individuals. And it's not likely for us to be in a situation like this again. It doesn't mean other women that would come forward, this is a precedent for how it's going to go.
Two different ways of looking at this, and I see your point. In the first instance, her defense attorney, Amber Heard's defense attorney, I thought made a very compelling point in closing argument. And it was basically this: how much more will we require victims of abuse to garner or collect in terms of evidence? I mean, she's testified. She had videos, not videos of the actual abuse, but videos of Johnny Depp acting aggressively, slamming cabinets, drinking a mega pint of red wine, behaving erratically. I thought that was a good point. I mean, she did amass some evidence, text messages that said awful things. I mean, really awful things. It's a miracle for Johnny Depp's team that he was somehow able to overcome even those text messages, which I thought said the nastiest stuff, and you would think would turn off any jury, but apparently it did not. So, I mean, yes, to that degree, there is an issue as to how much more does an abuse victim need to bring in terms of evidence. But on the other hand, I do agree with the sentiment that this is not like any other abuse case. And by the way, it wasn't an abuse case. This was not a domestic violence prosecution. This was not even a divorce case. It was a defamation case where it became a mini trial about violence and about abuse, not just physical abuse, but other kinds of abuse. And so for that reason, it's possible the jury, just like many other people watching this trial, looked at it and said, I'm not anything like these people. I can't identify with them. I don't have a home in all these countries. I don't have a team of assistants following me around, cleaning up my bed when the dog makes a mess in it or whatever else you believe that mess was in the bed. So I don't identify with these people. And I think with juries, so much is about being able to identify with the lawyers and with the parties. And if they can't identify with that person and say, I see some of myself in you, then they lose them.
Yeah, and you make such a good point that I think it's important to reiterate. This was a defamation suit. This was not necessarily about abuse, and that's not what necessarily the jury was saying from either side. Danny Savalas, my friend, as always, great to talk to you this hour. We appreciate it. All right, I want to turn now to Uvalde, Texas, where a mourning community is remembering the victims of last week's shooting at Robb Elementary. The investigation into how the shooting happened is now hitting a roadblock. NBC News correspondent Guad Venegas is in Uvalde for us. Guad, good to talk to you. First, tell us about the memorial services that are happening today and how the victims are being remembered.
Yasmin, well, the day started with services for Irma and Joe Garcia. This began at a local church under heavy police presence, officers from various agencies with members of the media from across the street. A lot of tension. The family members, people in the community, they have asked for privacy. They want to take this time for all of the different funeral services that are taking place throughout the week. So that happened earlier today. And then Jose Flores, the young boy who we've heard died in the shooting when his sister was leaving through a window. So sister survived, but he died. His services are taking place right now. Such a tragic story. And meanwhile, there's been visitation services for other victims today. And I mean, if you look at the list throughout the day, we've been looking at the list of services taking place today, tomorrow. I mean, it is just overwhelming for such a small town. Again, the members of the community and the families have asked for privacy while these services take place. Meanwhile, here in the city center at the town square, we've been seeing people come in from all over the state, people from San Antonio. We spoke to people from Kansas, people from southern Texas, coming to Uvalde to bring flowers, to light candles in honor of those, to pay their respect for those that lost their lives here, Yasmin.
Talk more about that, because